Sitting here with George Lagone from RevenueShift.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we know that you are a sales consultancy to improve effectiveness is some of the words on your website. I should probably know those
Right.
better at this
Right.
point. Would love to just kind of dive into a little bit of an overview of the business. And I know that you recently minted the organization.
Yeah.
You and the other founders have been in the business for a long time. So would love to know just a little bit about what the business is and maybe a little bit about the origin story and how you saw the opportunity to launch the business in Chicago.
Sure. Our business is really about helping sales organizations, commercial organizations, run their sales organization more efficiently. We tend to tell people we work on the data side of sales. So once you have your go-to-market strategy in place, helping execute on pieces of that. So everything from customer segmentation, targeting, on down through role design, org design, and getting into sales performance pieces, blocking and tackling things, quotas, comp, territories, and all the change management and administration that's associated with that, helping companies out with that. So imagine taking the output of your CRM data and your incentive compensation management or sales performance management systems and basically saying, what can we do? What story is this telling us? What can we do better to drive growth with our company? And that's what we help with. By definition, we're industry agnostic. We kind of service all industries. We've got a few different areas of strength that we service. Our origin story really is the three of us had worked in sales effectiveness practices and sales compensation practices at a number of large consultancies previously. I spent some time in-house at a big fintech, working as one of their heads of sales compensation. And we really saw an opportunity in the market to service our clients in a way that kind of split the difference between what a traditional management consultancy does and what HR and comp shops did, and kind of bridge both of those two things. The work we do too is pretty niche. We're a boutique firm. We're playing to grow, but this isn't hey, we go from being RevenueShift to being the size of Accenture, right?
Right.
It's a defined practice size. It's something that tends to work well on kind of a smaller scale. So friends of ours that have gone to larger consultancies and tried to scale this up to where they care about it, it tends to fail, right? Because it feels like there's a finite amount of work here where it works well kind of in the, $4 to $15 million kind of practice range for it. So we saw an opportunity to kind of capture that for ourselves and do the work the way that we want to do custom solutions, bespoke projects for our clients that we really weren't able to do when we were under the hood of a larger firm.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I can relate, kind of.
Right. Yeah.
I also shifted what I was doing for business, but I definitely understand shifting that focus and being able to capture kind of a niche market.
Sure.
So sales effectiveness to the layperson, let's call that me.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like you're going to help my team sell better.
Yeah.
And if I try and imagine what that looks like, I guess I'd like to learn a little bit more what that looks like. And there's kind of two maybe jumping off points. One might be, what is a common problem that somebody has that they kind of bring to your desk?
Sure.
So what does a lead look like? What does that conversation sound like?
Right.
And then I think maybe we can start from there. And then if you want to think of an example client without naming names, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Then understand what are some of the things that that your team does to make them more effective.
Right. One of the things that we commonly run into is clients will come to us and say, George, we think there's areas of growth that we see, identify, but we're really not capturing. Can you help us diagnose this? And it very, very common iteration of this is, we think there is more new logo opportunity out in the marketplace that we're not capturing. Our salespeople are too focused on current book of clients, going back to the well, and trying to extract more from what we have going on. What is it about us that's inhibiting us from going after new clients and getting that kind of inorganic growth. Um, and the solutions for that are myriad, right? But it really starts with us digging into their previous sales and sales performance data to find out what type of people are you, or what type of clients are you targeting right now? Are they of the right size? Do they match your ideal client profile? Do you have the right roles lined up against them? Do your people have the right skill set to sell the way that you want to capture revenue? Um, some of the solutions that we'll put forth for them may be resegmenting their accounts. We may be developing new values for their targets, designing new sales roles for them. So kind of repositioning their talent to capture, or showing them where they have gaps in their current talent base to uh, farm accounts versus hunt for new accounts is a really common thing. One of the other things that we commonly see is people come to us with a compensation problem.
Hmm.
And it's, George, my compensation costs are too high for the revenue that I'm collecting, or we don't think we're incentivizing the right behavior, something like that. And a lot of times that's a portion of what's going on. We tend to say that that's the symptom that shows up, though. A lot of times that gets attention, and the root cause that's actually driving the issue is something further up the chain.
Interesting.
Yes, you're having a compensation problem. That's actually rooted in the way your sales org is structured. Let me show you how, right? For instance.
Very interesting. So and I'm trying to put my company into the shoes of that conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's value to be added. Our sales team is a team of two.
Right. Right.
So what's like a typical size team of an organization that you work with?
Yeah.
And you mentioned some of the industries that you're agnostic to industry,
Right.
as is my business. But at the same time, you start making a name for yourself.
Absolutely.
Or certain industries are going through flux at the same time.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know just kind of what does a typical client look like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Typically, people want to say, what's the size of, from a revenue standpoint,
Mhm.
of clients that you're servicing, where that's really not the greatest proxy for us. It tends to be the size of the commercial organization. It is what drives who we work with. And also, do you have a kind of highly measured, data-driven sales force? And what I mean by that is, okay, if you are a defense contractor who is, has billions and billions of dollars of market cap, but you have these discrete teams that go after defined contracts and very parameterized, business development or sales type motion, that might not necessarily be the best fit for us, right? It's not kind of a market facing sales motion. Investment banking is very common too. That's not a great fit for us. Do all this work, create deals, run deals, and then at the end of the year, there's just sort of this pool of money that they want to divvy up on a discretionary basis. Those things aren't great fits for us.
Right.
What is really good fits for us is technology, right? You have a defined sales force. It's a very commercially led business, right? Engineering and the commercial org are the two things that drive tech companies, right? Great fit for us. Generally, large sales forces have CRMs in place, lots of data to work with. Similarly, industrial products, manufacturing, great places for us to work with. Interestingly enough, professional services, consulting firms and associated services firms tend to be really good about collecting data, having defined motions in the marketplace. A very organized sales force tends to work well with us. So it's really about, what does the commercial org typically look like in an industry, to see if it's a match with us.
Yeah. Awesome. So if you're comfortable, I would love to, I can use the word case study,
Yeah.
but to kind of contextualize some of this with maybe a recent example, maybe a project your team's currently working through now,
Sure.
or maybe one you love talking about that just captures some of those elements. And what I'd love to share a little bit about is, we'll get into specifically a question about a day in the life of Revenue Shift.
Yeah.
But I think, when I hear about organizations like yours, I understand the value prop.
Mhm.
I I have so many questions on what is that experience like,
Yeah.
right? And my business has that same thing. I
Hmm.
need a this, great. Here's what it looks like. Here's how much it's going to be better. What's that experience going to feel like?
Yeah.
And so, for kind of the behind the scenes, what if you could think of examples or something to draw from to maybe tell us, kind of what their problem was, what you kind of honed in on, how that went.
Right. I'll give you some of the play by play of a client we're currently working with. We're probably 30 to 40% of the way through our engagement with them.
Perfect.
They are a communication platform as a service company, and also do SMS verification. Number of players in that space. They have uh, they have an interesting model, a consumption-based technology model,
Okay.
which isn't uncommon, but it's interesting just because signing a deal is only worth the ink on the paper, right? You actually
Right.
have to get the client to use the thing that you signed for term with them to
Makes
actually
sense.
collect revenue, which introduces unique challenges. And one of the things that these companies, this whole industry, is kind of dealing with right now is commoditization, and also new entrants that aren't necessarily dependent upon text for two-factor authentication, right?
Yep.
Using other mediums for it, things like that. And how do they drive sales, grow in this environment? What do they do with it? And the problem they came to us with was again, we're looking for help with our sales compensation, right? That
Hmm.
we think our incentives aren't really driving the right behaviors, and we need to fix that. And we get under the hood of it. And similar to what I was describing before, there's definitely an issue with aligning the sales roles to each and every deal, and segmenting their customers too, not just along the lines of how much are they spending right now, but what's total potential for them, and who should they be dedicating fewer or more resources to, and also who should you be peeling out of that current client um, type environment, and have hunting for new customers, which right now for them everyone is a hybrid seller, has responsibility for new logo and for growing internal.
Yeah.
So we are tackling the compensation problem with them, but there's also an element of, hey, let's make sure your roles are kind of positioned correctly to attack the market as well.
Interesting. Now, with really quickly, about how many people are in that sales organization?
Yeah, they are U.S. only.
Okay, so big
Um,
already. If the sentence starts with
yeah.
U.S. only.
So this is yeah. So it's a global organization, over 1,000 employees. Commercial organization is north of 10, approaching 20% of headcount for them. So
Okay.
so somewhere, depending on what you call a salesperson,
Yeah,
it is somewhere between 100 and 200.
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So, determining the kind of the right people and the right roles, right,
Yeah.
is one of the things that you're working on. What are some of the things? So, I'm going to shift this to a day in the life of somebody working at
Yeah.
RevenueShift. Congrats! I
Sure.
got a job. I'm
Yeah.
in your brand new offices. I'm excited. I get to hang out with George every day.
Right.
Um, what are some of the things that those people are doing to come to these conclusions?
Yeah, absolutely. And we always say that discovery is yeah, I know it's a cliche, but it's really a three-legged stool, right? It's what can we find out from external market research? What can we apply from our experience to you? And then what can we discover by talking to your people and looking at your data, right? Kind of pulling those three things together
Yep.
and figure out what the story is with your organization, your industry, your growth story. And our some of the things that you'll see us do, and I talk about that because a lot of the work is really about the research, the finding out, right? Where the design, the solving problems, and actually designing solutions is really just kind of output of it. So a lot of what we'll do on the intake of every project interviews with everybody. This is going to sound familiar to you, being
Right.
being in professional services. And one of the differentiators I feel like is, how deep are you getting with your clients to really understand their problems? Are you getting the perspective of not just the chief revenue officer for us, who a lot of times is our lead, but also a few of the people who are boots on the ground selling, right? And kind of all layers through that. Are you talking to adjacent organizations, marketing, customer success, etc., to really try to get a 360 perspective on what's going on in the company and developing that perspective, listening really well, which you guys did really well for us, understanding what we do. So it'll, so I think I think it should translate to kind of what you're used to. Is honestly one of the big things that we do, and one of the big differentiators for us, that we take the time to really do that well. Getting past that, it's kind of putting together all of that research, looking at it in the context of what's going on with the client, what's going on with their marketplace, and bringing forth a set of hypotheses, right? That
Yep.
some of which are what we were contracted to work on, but there's always some that are, hey, we discovered this other handful of things. Maybe you want us to attack them for you. Maybe they're a next phase. Maybe you're not concerned about that. But kind of bringing them all of these hypotheses that we have. And then moving forward and actually designing solutions, right? Is that creating new roles? Is that segmenting your accounts differently? Getting under the data of your previous sales to see, what type of clients are we best at going after? Do we need to target our efforts more? And really digging into that data piece. So kind of on one hand, it's that discovery, the research, the curiosity. The other big skill set and thing that people drive at is the data mining, the analysis, the modeling, to understand kind of the hard quantitative reality
Yeah.
of it too. Putting that together and figuring out what do we do, or what are potential ways we could go.
Very interesting. And what's cool about that is, obviously, so a lot of firms will hire professional services teams.
Sure.
Your focus is on sales. Mine is different,
Right.
because there's a belief that you've seen it all before. You got a recipe. Let me
Right.
go in and plug it and tell you what to do. I've always felt as a business owner that somewhere there's a door and there's a bunch of people in that room that have all the answers for all the things I'm trying to
Right.
figure out. Just
Yeah.
where do I find that door,
Yeah.
right? And the truth of it is part of that is true. You have
Yeah.
seen it all. You have seen a lot. You know what works. But at the same time, I find it so interesting how many businesses, particularly in professional services, start with one ask.
Mm-hmm.
And the point and shoot folks will say, that ask costs $10 and go do it for them.
Right.
But where the difference is using it as a starting point, and then it all comes down to asking questions.
Absolutely.
I remember we were doing a project one time. So I can relate to this. We were working for a bank. They were actually the first internet-only bank ever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no vault, a lot of fun. They had a vault. It had candy bars in the
Okay.
closet to meet compliance. And legend is the CEO in the middle of the final banking audit. They go, "Where's your vault?" It's like, "We're internet only." It's
Yeah.
like, "You got to have a vault." And he went to
But
Walmart, and it's still there.
safe.
Yeah.
Nice.
But same thing. We're asking a lot of questions. We're diving and we're talking to kind of everyone. It sounds like you have a similar process,
Sure.
which I think is one of the most fun parts about the job, is you get to learn all sorts of ins and outs and how
Absolutely.
these work. And so we're talking with different bankers. We're hearing about how the real estate bankers all came from real estate, so they understand the business and all these awesome things. Then we asked customer service what the most popular question was, and they said, "Are you a real bank?"
Yeah.
And we're like, all right, the rest of this is awesome. Maybe let's start there for a little bit. I should say that bank then successfully launched on the NASDAQ. They're big deal and super, super successful. This is very early on in start, and they're successful then too. But I also think it's interesting on humans delivering value often comes down to asking the right questions.
Right.
And with the advent of AI and everyone contemplating how that's going to start, that's all kind of asking questions
Absolutely.
too. They always call them prompts now.
Correct.
So in terms of hopefully a good question or some interesting question, what are curious on touching on some of the trends that you're starting to see in the space that you serve. So you mentioned
Yeah.
kind of different industries, hitting things. different ways of people seeking uh, firms like Revenue Shift.
Yeah.
What are some trends that you're starting to see since you've started the business?
Yeah, trends that we're starting to see. One of the things I started to mention briefly earlier about technology firms is this move away from, um, call it 1990s, early aught style, selling software out of a box,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone kind of got on board and started digitizing everything, and then software moving to as a service, and now everything it's X as a service, right?
Yeah.
And the third wave of that, it feels like, is coming, where it's going back to where it's now on a consumption basis, where it's kind of piece by piece. So we're seeing this move. We think it's technology first, but it feels like for 30 plus years now, everything is kind of followed. Tech has been the driver in commercial organization structure, and everyone has followed in the wake of them. And that's really the third thing that's happening now. And we're seeing technology companies follow in the wake of that and move to that. And we think it's only a few years behind that. Other industries will follow suit. Um, think about it, where you're driving your car, you turn the key, and it's $3 every time you turn the key, instead of like paying a lease payment.
Right.
For instance, I know it's super dystopian, but but we see some trend going that way. And there's plenty of companies that are struggling with that transition. So we're getting called about that quite a bit.
Right.
The other thing that we're seeing is the commercialization of professional services firms, like us, where it was very much, and it still is, human to human contact, a lot of relationship driven. I think the kind of, I would say, professionalization of the sales function in professional services is really, really hitting stride right
Really?
now. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. So, coming from professional services myself, the old challenge back in the day
Hmm.
was you would, and I'm overdoing it, but you have the salesperson and they land the big, huge deal. They hand it to
Right.
the team to execute. Team's like, what the heck
What'd you
did
just
you,
give me?
what did you sell? How do I do this? And they got to
Yeah.
unravel it, this, that, and the other. Then that evolved to, from this is, and maybe my history's incorrect. So my own observations that then kind of evolved to professionals saying, "Hey, well, we should get our doers in the
Hmm.
selling, right?"
Right.
And it's very much a consulting model. But then let's get some salespeople to go out and logo hunt.
Right.
And those poor folks suffered a year of hearing, when are you gonna produce something,
Right.
right? And I'm trying to educate how long it
Hmm.
takes to build these. Then they land it, and then no one wants to pay them.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
So so it's interesting on that. And speaking to some of the trends that's professional services.
Yeah.
Back to software, and $3 to turn the key to your car. In some ways, that's an easier sale because it's less of a commitment,
Sure.
kinda, because
Right.
the other part of it
Yeah.
is it's expensive to get rid of your car and get a new one.
Yeah.
Um, but compensating for it, I just closed a deal. But to your point
Right.
earlier, I closed ink on a paper.
Hmm.
How does that performance get into that model then? So that's what your work, that's what you're
That
focusing on.
Yeah, and it's a difficult problem, right? I
Yeah.
mean, revenue predictability is what every CFO wants
Yeah.
out there, right? And the more you the more you move to a consumption based model, and part of that is why SaaS was so spectacular, right? And the move to that, not only did it make it easier for companies to adopt complex systems, and for the producers of technology to roll things out on a fast basis, not have to do physical updates. I mean, there was all sorts of great things from that aspect, but financial people loved it because you could see, hey, when I sign a deal, I know exactly what the tail of this revenue is, and I know what this looks like, right? I mean, we talk about revenue multiples and ARR multiples for deals, right?
Right.
That's all where that was driven off
Yeah.
of. So this is now really upending this, and I think a big thing that's driving it is places wanting to get rapid adoption from even smaller clients than they were from SaaS, to start really driving the engine, where it's like, hey, it was a $3,000 piece of software that then we sold as a license for 300. Now a single use is $3,
Right.
right? And starts to kind of democratize it more potentially. I mean, does it end up hurting the consumer or whoever the user is in the long run?
Yeah.
Still to be seen. But yeah, the challenges with it, and it incentivizing and driving the right sales behaviors in that environment is very, very interesting. And I have a working theory that, are we going to see kind of sales role despecialization, where for years and years we have seen, and again, technology leading this, where you had a salesperson and then you split. Okay, you had a hunter and a farmer, right?
Hmm.
An account executive and an account manager,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
so on and
Yep.
so forth,
Yep.
right? Customer success, a pre-sale engineer, a post-sale engineer, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there's this massive bloat in the commercial organization. Well, now you have a salesperson who's getting the ink on the paper, but if you want to compensate them for money they bring in, they've got to stay involved in the deal. So
Right.
is this going to swing back to having fewer but longer cycle salespeople, right? Or sales roles, sales headcount
Yep.
involved in deals, where you were chopping that up amongst 4, 5, 6 roles
Right.
before. So again, something we're playing with and talking about. It's not even bleeding edge. It's just theoretical at this point. But
Yeah.
we see it, if companies don't want to kind of pay for what can be hopes and dreams at the times of the signature. I mean, you've got to keep those commercial people who sign the deal involved with it.
Right.
So yeah, number of different methods you could do it. Difficult problem to solve. A lot of big trade-offs, but really interesting. We're having fun working on the issues.
Yeah. I definitely want a professional helping me
Yeah.
answer those questions.
Yep.
So a couple of questions. So you've grown. When we first met, is the point I should disclose that we have done work together.
Yes.
With that being said, when we first met, you were two and a half, 3.
Right.
Within that, your head count now is more than triple that. Or I don't want to overdo it.
We're 6 and an intern.
6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's double.
And a contractor. And it depends what way you skin it. Yeah, but yeah, significantly more.
Yeah. Well, welcome to my world.
Yeah.
Let's say, well,
Yeah.
it depends how I.
Yeah.
With that all said, so you've been adding people.
Right.
How does someone prepare for this? Because what's an ideal candidate look like? Who's someone that should be excited to work at a place like RevenueShift?
Yeah.
Or not a place like, at RevenueShift.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the people that are absolutely ideal candidates for us, I think a lot of times have come from large consulting maybe before, typically have a pretty data heavy background. Half of our staff is proper data scientists.
Really?
So yeah, can dig in. I mean, use Python more than they use Excel. Can run machine learning models. Right? They hate the word AI because they think AI is just a just a marketing term for what's really machine learning and data science.
Right.
And it's people who really love working in the data, but want to do it in pursuit of a business outcome and don't just love the math for the math.
Yeah.
Where I feel like those type of data scientists, maybe they go work for, I don't know, a prop trading shop or a cybersecurity company doing algorithm development for them.
Right.
When you have that want to work in data, but also actually solve business problems and really commercial business problems, tends to be a really good fit for us.
So that's fascinating. I did not expect Python to come out of the conversation.
Yeah.
Is that so? I would imagine, are they working in tools that your team has that are proprietary, or is that because they're diving into client tools and extracting data from that manner?
No, this is them. Again, part of us running bespoke engagements is, if we need to write code to get a job done, we do it, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily putting together a product, but just finding the best way to process data for folks. And it's one of the things, and maybe I didn't do a good job of talking about this before, but we think one of our big advantages in the market is the fact that we use data science, machine learning, and apply it basically everywhere we can on client engagements.
Yeah.
Where that is another one of those things that's really hard to do at scale at a large firm. there just aren't that many high-level data scientists out there to go around, right?
Yeah.
The Deloittes, the Accentures of the world, et cetera, not to give them airtime, but you can't hire 50,000 data scientists, right? And it's just something that's better suited for a boutique firm when you really need kind of that, what I just described, right?
Yep.
Narrow kind of skill set where it's like you really like reading the Wall Street Journal and you know how to code Python, you know?
Right.
So,
So one last question on that, because that's so fascinating. So what if, what would be an example of your team had to write some code to solve the problem?
yeah. So one of the things that we are early in pitching this, and this is for industrial wholesaler that operates kind of nationwide, but has really disparate systems. Just kind of the way that they grew up, it is writing a suggestion engine
Mm-hmm.
for them. When you have a local branch in one place that is selling one item, what's the next best thing to suggest to somebody, right? And this is getting down towards kind of Amazon level,
Yeah.
hey, you bought this, what's the next thing that you could do? But it's either can be suggesting, what's the next best product, but also can talk about, hey, I've looked at your CRM data and I know that after you made this call, you sent an email and you closed 4 deals doing that. Not only can I tell you what product do you need to push forward, but this is your next best sales motion that you should be doing. This is a thing that's actually the biggest place that we see this is in professional services,
right?
Where it's, you have these really big client relationships. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of people touching it. Figuring out what's the next best thing for me to do or ask about or potential adjacency. And it's mining the customer data, the performance data, the CRM activity data to build an engine that drives off of that data. What should I be doing next?
Wow.
Yep.
So that's much deeper level than just going in and saying, let's organize this place differently and change your comp models.
Yeah.
Which I knew it was beyond that anyway.
Yeah.
But that's very exciting. And I'm already just thinking of like a million ways I'd want to throw you guys on problems that I see all the time, as well as someone who I should send you their resume.
One of the things that we do with it too is in terms of, if you think like large law firms or something like that, where it's or accounting firms, places like that, where the relationships are held by maybe a few partners, and they've been mining these relationships for years to drive revenue. But it's, hey, yeah, that's where current revenue is coming from, but let me figure out where my growth is coming from. And maybe it's not those people who were traditionally just defined as rainmakers previously, right? Is it another place? And do I need to be dedicating more resources to, hey, here's a junior partner who's 3 years in, but has landed XYZ tech firms, and like we see the trajectory of those, and like that's the next place for us is really there. Should we be investing in that?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you're onto something there, because we do I've worked with a lot of law firms, have a lot of friends in law firms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of this has been said on every podcast that's ever mentioned.
Sure.
The state of law firms and AI and shaping and mentoring and remote work and everything else.
Right.
So the quick summary, the theme is the old traditional model. You'd hire the junior person that was really smart, pair them with a rainmaker. As they grow, they learn. They learn from observing how they're doing all these things, and everyone's worried if that's going to happen. And while we're still worrying about that, AI came in, specifically generative AI, right? Where there's a belief that I know of places that built chatbots and they point it at their internal documents and the questions they would have an intern go grab and find. They're asking the chatbot, producing these materials and stuff like that.
Right.
And so it sounds all hunky-dory, right? You're saving on costs and efficiencies on the junior. But how are you training the people that are going to let you retire?
Right.
And how are you growing the firm when what you were relevant, what your reputation is for, is no longer the cool thing?
Right.
So that's a fascinating product that makes me want to put you in touch with some other people. Okay, cool. So questions I like to ask. First one is, so I'm thinking about the growth of Revenue Shift, which is largely your focus within the organization.
Right.
What are some things that keep you up at night?
Yeah, that's great. Besides impending election holding up capex spending, which everyone is worried about right now, um, I think it is the I'm not going to sit here and say that I worry about AI taking our jobs. A lot of the things that I described to you that we do is as far as like incentives, role design, org design. The books have been published, right?
Yep.
The data is out there. Our job is really to contextualize and add our experience, and help try to customize it. So I guess I don't have a fear of
Yeah.
AI. I think
Yeah.
like a lot of people do right now. Um, it, where I have concerns with is people getting disillusioned, thinking that um, s- technology is going to solve all of these problems for them,
Right.
right? And start to equate what they've been sold that a sales performance management or incentive compensation management can do for them, and have that kind of reflect badly on us, even though like it's not part of it. It's like that's an input for us and we try to help you out with it.
Yep.
Someone told you that that was going to solve all of these problems that maybe I can help you with, depending if we get under there. Um, but it's just how much of that has been oversold.
Right.
And we run into that a lot. Our space, the technology solutions are in our space are, I think a lot of other spaces are really, really saturated, and it
Hmm.
feels like um, it's kind of ripe to be normalized
Yep.
a little bit.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is particularly people writing the checks for the licenses and everything else.
Yeah.
People hate Microsoft Excel.
Right.
It's one of the most enabling tools that's ever been out there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
People hate Google search results. Show me a better,
Right.
So like there's a lot of risk when technology is part of the solution as an enablement platform and how you
Yeah.
use it versus people saying I have this, it should just work.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a
Exactly.
wonderful project management system. I complain about it all the
Right. I don't need you to fix my business problem. I need you to fix my technology problem.
time.
That's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not really what you have.
Okay. So that's a fun one. So next one might be a little bit more fun, and I might have asked you this one before, but again, going back to revenue shift, growth, things that keep you up at night, how you can help clients. If I were to give you 10 million bucks,
Yeah.
how would you spend that?
It's a great it's a great prompt. Um, but have talked to friends who are bankers, investors, PE firms, and have been offered capital.
Oh yeah, so someone's
A lot of
offering you
times,
10 million
right?
bucks. Yeah, yeah,
And not necessarily 10 million,
yeah, yeah,
right? That'd be awesome.
yeah.
I would disappear. But no, it's so our business isn't terribly capital intensive, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and given that given that level of investment, I think it would be, and I mean, I'm just hypothesizing because I really don't know what I would do with it. It would be about taking some of those solutions that I just discussed and maybe productizing them or
Yep.
setting that up kind of off to the side and say, hey, can we, like, while we're becoming while we're growing as a professional services firm, is there also some of these technology issues that we're discovering and seeing in common that we can kind of slide off to the side and create a product or a technology solution around it. I guess that would be what I would do if I was given $10 million. But again, our business is pretty boutique, is pretty niche. I'm guessing the total market for it probably isn't, it isn't $500 million in the U.S. I'd be surprised if it was anywhere near that. So a large level of investment for that, like, we couldn't, the marketing effectiveness of that money wouldn't be
Yeah.
terribly much
Right.
for us. So yeah, I guess that's what I would do with it.
Dave, well, so it's funny considering the voices coming from. He's trying to get me to say marketing budget,
Yeah.
but it's interesting. I like answering the question because what typically comes out of it is a couple different variants. So after everyone gets over getting taking a vacation, all that stuff. But
Yeah.
um, typically, it either goes in a direction of a bunch of marketing initiatives or things like that, or
Right.
big hires that people have been wanting to do but are waiting for that kind of right time.
Sure.
The innovators, it reveals a product maybe that they're thinking about or some sort of
Right.
innovation,
Right.
right? And so as I ask that question often to folks, I ask it to clients too. And in that case is to help say, well, hey, maybe we can help with
Right.
that. But it's a very interesting one that as you have a model that is working, it is continuing to innovate.
Hmm.
And there's two ways of innovating. One is doing something that you do better or positioning it differently
Sure.
or switching a couple things around, right? In professional service, we call that methodology,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And then the other is, can we do something that can, we'll have to go through our own sales shift, right?
Yeah.
Such as productizing, creating something that can be maybe sold, distributed differently,
Right.
and bring value even more efficiently than your team is doing by being a product.
Yeah,
Right?
it would have to be a really great mousetrap for us because one of the things that we value is the time with our clients, having that FaceTime, learning about their businesses. Like, are part of the
Right.
reasons why me, Tom, Mark, and all of our staff really like doing consulting, right? So,
Yeah.
in order for us to shift away from doing professional services work, we'd have to think we had something really, really hot on our hands.
Yeah.
So,
100%. That's awesome.
yeah.
Cool. So for other businesses that are out there that are having trouble with sales, are looking to make their team more effective, find those, how do we get more logos,
Yeah.
which you and I use that nomenclature, new clients.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Is I think it's in one of our conversations we're talking, get more logos. And
Yeah.
someone's like, what do you mean by that? Like
What?
new clients, as opposed to farming and growing and servicing
Sure.
yours. But is there, any kind of advice for folks that are trying to solve those types of problems, either in-house or even working with teams? Some things that they might want to consider, or some things to look at internally on their organizations
Yeah.
that would lead them to say there is an opportunity here to utilize, someone like RevenueShift in doing these things.
Yeah. Taking that kind of in a few pieces, I think it is it- number one. I think anytime you start to get into issues with the commercial org, I think getting some sort of outside look in rapidly, and not just, yeah, I know I do that for a living, but I mean whether that's a mentor, a board member, somebody like that, get fresh eyes on it. What's going on? What do you see in the market? Look at the way that we're aligned. Do you think we're doing the right thing, right? And start to develop some data points, some hypotheses about what's going on or what you think some potential issues could be. As far as when to specifically when to bring us in and things that we would help with our clients. I think it's taking a very honest look at the capacity of your team to get things done, because a lot of times we run into with clients, either they have the skill set on their team but don't have the bandwidth,
Mm-hmm.
or vice versa, right? And a lot of times it's, hey, 2024, oh, we're going to redesign our comp plan. You never get around to it. 2025, now you're calling us. It's like, you could have been on this a year earlier had you kind of looked and been like, hey, let's be honest, can we really get this done or not?
Yeah.
And I think everyone wants to be, a lot of people who are in business are kind of naturally optimistic about how much they could get done in a given amount of time.
Right.
But kind of being honest with ourselves about what we could tackle on our own versus what we need to go outside for or hire for, however you solve for that, I think would serve people really well. And I know I'm rambling a bit here, but hey, it's a podcast. So it was sort of like when we started working with you guys, working with Click, and saying, we don't have. I thought I was going to build my website on our own, right? Mm-hmm. Very quickly learned that I do not have any sort of bandwidth to do this, nor skill, right? So it's kind of twofold. Really quickly figure that out. Our IT support and our managed service providers, et cetera, very quickly right away.
Yeah.
We learned that we needed partners if we were going to scale this thing, run this thing, grow this thing. And I think mature businesses need and or should take some of that same perspective on their own. I was forced to because it was a startup, but
Yeah.
have some of that same attitude.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I couldn't agree more. Particularly with the getting an outside perspective.
Yeah.
And it's funny because sometimes when I talk to other business owners, they're looking for a peer or
Right.
or someone that they can look to. And I've gotten a lot of benefit out of forming relationships with other organizations that I could consider my competitor.
Sure.
Right. A little bit of that is everyone, misery loves company, not because we want people to be miserable. We just don't want to feel like we're the only one
Right.
going through
Right.
things. But I've also found that, and so I'm camping on to your thing to have somebody else look at it on people that don't know the business.
Yeah.
Because when you have those conversations, it forces you to. One of the biggest challenges that all of us have is it used to be called an elevator pitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now people work. I probably still is
Right.
called an elevator pitch, but condensing it. But it forces you to explain your what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish in just a totally different way.
Right.
And I've always found that learning from other industries and how they are solving problems. And in my case, even 10 and 12-year-olds, I throw business questions at my kids all the time, and it's amazing what they come back with.
Right.
Because it's just like, oh yeah, that was good. Cool. Well, awesome. This was great conversation.
Absolutely.
I already personally knew a lot about your business.
Right.
I even learned some more dynamics to it, which is exciting. And, really what I'm trying to accomplish here with all these conversations is, it's Chicago. Thanks again for your time today. I think it's very informative.
Love being on
covering all the above.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thanks, George.